Hi everyone, and welcome to a cheese-centric episode of Noodle Journey, where I'll be reviewing Paldo's cheese ramyun flavor. Now this episode and the next two are going to be cheese-focused, a Korean cheese trilogy, if you will. So buckle up. We're starting with this one that I have had once before, way back before I started this channel, so it's been a little while. Now Paldo products have always been super reliable, so far. And this cheese ramyun is another offering in Paldo's exports to America, and you can get this in Asian grocery stores for around $10 for a 4-pack, or a little bit more if you're shopping on Amazon or other online storefronts. Now we've looked at some other cheesy Korean noodle reviews so far, mainly Samyang's various cheesy bulldog offerings, which are all delicious but are a totally different kind of product than this. You see, this is a soup, not a sauced noodle. Indulge me for a moment in a little rant about cheese, if you will. Now, I've talked about people's hesitation to eat noodles with cheese before, but it bears repeating because there was just a thread on Reddit a little while back of someone accidentally buying cheese bulldog and then just straight up refusing to eat it like it was poison. There's still a strong aversion that I've seen regarding putting cheese in noodles, and it seems to be mainly from ramen snobs who think cheese doesn't belong in Asian food. And sure, traditionally that may be true. Cheese just doesn't work in some things. But as an overall concept, I don't think adding cheese to certain Asian noodle dishes is any weirder than your standard mac and cheese. And dietary restrictions aside, who doesn't love mac and cheese? Like to everyone who complains about cheesy Korean ramyun being gross, do you also hate macaroni and cheese? I'm willing to bet you don't, or at least you don't care nearly as much. And while I absolutely think there's some cases where adding cheese to certain noodles is a bridge too far and would clash with the flavors, adding the right cheese to the right noodles is, I think, awesome. It brings a level of creaminess and comfort that really adds to the experience, and it can even tone down spiciness. Now, I'm not suggesting that you grate your finest Parmigiano Reggiano into every noodle bowl you eat, but certainly a nice melty slice of processed American cheese in something like Shin Ramyun is delicious. And so that brings me to this case, in which Paldo is bundling that cheese with the soup for you. It may not be really clear from the package what to expect here, but this is essentially a Shin-esque red chili soup with a powdered cheese packet that you mix in at the end. What kind of cheese, you might ask me? I've eaten this and I still don't actually know. The package shows what looks to be a very orange Swiss-style cheese, but the ingredients don't really get that specific. The cheese powder ingredient list just says cheese powder, along with whey powder, milk powder, and some other stuff. So maybe it's a blend of some sort, something Swiss adjacent because of the picture here. Maybe it's a secret, I don't know. But it does have a pretty mild cheddar-like flavor from what I remember. Speaking of ingredients, let's look at the back. Sodium in this is ridiculously high at 2,360 milligrams, which is 103% of your daily allowance. So please stay hydrated when you eat this, and if you have blood pressure issues, maybe stay away from it entirely. Let's open up. Inside the package, we've got a square block of Paldo's ramyun noodles, and fun fact, I didn't notice this until recently, but there is onion and garlic extract in the noodles, so that's neat. It's no wonder why they seem to have some extra good flavor. These are probably my favorite of all the Korean noodles. There is a soup powder with your usual assortment of MSG, yeast, chili, and so forth, but it has artificial beef flavoring, which makes this whole thing vegetarian friendly. However, I have seen some English packaging listing beef bone extract in the ingredients, making that version obviously not vegetarian, and so if you don't eat beef, consult the label carefully before you purchase this. There's also a vegetable packet containing a very, very minuscule amount of cabbage, carrot, and green onion, and then the powdered cheese packet that makes the magic happen. So let's get cooking. Alright, so this is what the noodles and broth look like when they come off the stove. You add the cheese powder in afterwards for whatever reason, according to the instructions. Because we have this extra step, I'm actually going to do something and try this broth without the cheese in it. Okay, so on its own here, you've already got kind of a pretty tasty spicy beef broth. If the idea of adding this entire cheese powder pack intimidates you, and you just want to add a little bit, know that the basic soup here is pretty good on its own. Pretty much comparable to Shin Ramyun or Nangshin's Enseng Tangmen, something along those lines. It's good, but we're going to make it better. And we're going to add the cheese powder in, and I am going to use the entire thing. I tried to spread it out because I remember it clumping up last time I made this, and the powder had other plans that all just kind of dumped out in one shot. So I'm going to give this a very thorough stir and try to make sure that there's no lumps left in this. You can see some right there. Okay, I think that's good enough. As far as what this smells like, there is a whiff of that cheese powder and whey. It's kind of like what you would expect from a powdered cheese snack. And the artificial beefiness of the broth is kind of still there too. And the presentation is just okay. It's only slightly creamier from the cheese powder. Still a little bit thin, thinner than you might expect. You know, part of the fun of reviewing something that I've already eaten is stopping and taking everything in on a totally different, deeper level, rather than just stuffing my face right away. But speaking of stuffing my face, it is time to dig in. All right, this brings me back. Starting with the noodle review. These are the same Ramyun noodles that Paldo has used in other products like Namja, for example. Those were a 9, and these are a 9. They're pleasantly chewy, nice thickness, flavorful without a harsh aftertaste. I actually ate a couple of dry noodles while I was cooking. They've got a great taste all on their own. And the cheese broth sticks to them very well. You get a lot of cheese flavor with just a plain old bite of noodles. So 9 out of 10 for the noodles. And let's talk about spice now, because you may think, based on the packaging, that this is an inoffensive, mild, cheesy product. And it's not. It's not nearly as spicy as, you know, the cheesy bulldog flavors, but it's not mild either. Because of the cheese, I think it kind of sneaks up on you and surprises you when you get a bite of that chili powder. This is definitely approaching what I would call a medium heat. I think I'm going to give this a 4 out of 10 on the spiciness scale. Thankfully, it doesn't linger, and the cheese helps make it very tolerable. And now let's get into the flavor as a whole. So what you've got is a delicious red chili, oniony, artificial beef soup, and a slightly creamy, mildly cheesy finish, adding a little extra flavor. The onion and the red pepper come through in the broth really well, so the cheese is not very overpowering at all, which may disappoint some of you if you want this to be really heavily cheesy, but I think this is a more balanced flavor than I remember. The problem I had with the cheese powder last time was that it didn't dissolve correctly and congealed despite all my stirring. And I think I managed to get that worked out this time, so just make sure that you stir this very thoroughly so that you're not eating little lumps of powdered cheese. Although if that does happen to you, some bites are going to be cheesier than others because of that. And yeah, the cheese flavor is pretty much a mildly nutty cheddar. It's tasty, but it's not necessarily consistent because of that clumping. The dried vegetables are pretty lost in this. The packet was small, and they don't really contribute much flavor. Maybe a little slight carroty, oniony taste here or there. And my last complaint is the consistency of the broth. It doesn't scream cheesy. It's much thinner than you probably think it's going to be. You probably want to add some actual melty cheese in here to get it to be thicker, because following the directions yields this, which is not the consistency I really want out of a cheesy soup. But those issues aside, I think the flavor of this is great, even if it might not be what you expect. You might be disappointed that it's not as cheesy as you want it to be, but it does work well all put together. So grading this more for what it is than for what it isn't, overall I am going to give this a 7.5 out of 10. It doesn't get as crazy with the cheese as I think it could, but it is still a tasty experience. Yeah, I really enjoy this combination of flavors, and if you love cheese and don't mind that it came in a powder form, and you can handle the medium spiciness that goes with this, you should try this. Yeah, the vegetable packet is lacking, and those clumps of powdered cheese aren't my favorite if you can't stir them out, but otherwise there is some good flavor here, and you'll probably want to just temper your expectations if you're expecting more cheese than this offers. Let's talk quickly about add-ins for this, since you might be wondering how to spruce this up a little bit more. Two really easy to add things that would make this into a dynamite standalone meal without taking any additional time out of your day. Throw some fresh scallions in here besides the dried ones in the veggie packet because there's barely any in the packet. And if you're not freaked out by the sodium, add a slice of Spam. No, really, Spam mixed in with this cheesy soup is good. It would also take the sodium content to a whole other level, so maybe use Spam Light or something like that. Let me know in the comments if you do try this and what you think. Next on the noodle review pile will be Otogi's answer to this cheesy ramyun soup, which I have not tried before, and so I'll see you for that video. As always, please like and subscribe to continue on this noodle journey with me.